Justin and I were friends from the get-go. Even as kids, he could find the silver lining to any cloud. Just always positive, always happy, always driven just to enjoy life. I remember when he told me on the phone that he had started to notice a lot of weakness in his hands. I thought, okay, his hands are his lifeblood. This is his career. I wasn't prepared for the first time I saw him after his hands had really started to decline when he asked me to help feed him. Having to hold the glass with two hands, needing a straw because he couldn't navigate holding the cup. And then now it's his wife or I or his kids have to hold the cup for him. It was heavy, it was hard to see that change. I thought over and over, why not me, you know? Because in a second, I would trade places, in a second.
I could see that dark, deep hole that you can go down. And I was on the edge of that. But then, life is too short to sit around and complain. And life is too short to go down that deep, dark hole.
Hey, buddy.
Hey,
How you doing, man?
how's it going?
Good.
Aw.
Thanks, buddy. You too, man.
Well, I wasn't really looking for the Camino. It kind of found me. I was watching PBS and on came Rick Steves and he was doing a thing on Spain. And then he was talking about the Camino. And I was like, what's that? I'd never heard of it at all. Later, I turned to my wife and I just said, man, that'd be something that would be crazy to do. I wonder if I could do that in my wheelchair. My immediate thought was, like, Pat and I should do this together.
We were sitting in his living room, and he asked me, you want to go across 500 miles of northern Spain with me? And I said, no, I'll push you.
Thank you. Well, hello, how are you guys? It's been quite an evening, hasn't it? My name's Justin Skeesuck. I am so happy to be here amongst all you guys, like-minded, creative individuals. You know, you guys have all chosen this career as an outlet for your creativity. But what if that outlet was taken away? That's my reality. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about my life and my journey. My best friend, Patrick, and I were born just over 36 hours apart in the same hospital. Our parents knew each other, our grandparents knew each other, and we've lived life together, traveled together and played sports together. He actually convinced me to play football one time, and I don't know why, but I sucked. But, you know, sometimes life takes you down a different road. When I was 16, I was involved in an automobile accident. I know what you're probably thinking. That's what put me in a wheelchair, and thus here I am today. In reality, I didn't know this at the time, but I walked away from the accident, and about 6 months later, I noticed some weakness in my left foot. I was playing soccer in the fall, running down the soccer field, and I couldn't quite control my foot. It was just kind of flopping around. No pain, no numbness or anything like that. I just didn't work. And thus started my doctors and trying to figure out what's going on with me, right? And I'll boil this down into a short story. But who has heard of Lou Gehrig's disease? Is it a good one? No. That was my first diagnosis. But luckily, I do not have the disease, that disease particularly, but I have one that's very, very, very similar. That's why I was actually diagnosed with it early on. I have a progressive neuromuscular disease caused by that car accident I was in. It triggered a dormant disease that was in my body. And the disease is called, are you guys ready? It's called multifocal acquired motor axonopathy. Yeah, you can remember that one? Probably not. They call it MAMA for short. It works almost exactly like Lou Gehrig's disease does. My autoimmune attacks my nervous system, and then my nervous system decides to stop working. So I have full sensation from head to toe. I'm not paralyzed or anything like that. My muscles just don't work anymore. And the disease works its way, started my left foot, worked its way up my left leg, jumped to my right foot, worked up my right leg, and stayed to my waist and below for many years. You know, slowly but surely, it got worse. I had to use drop foot braces, which are braces on your feet to keep me upright. Then I used braces and a cane, and then I used a walker, and then I used a manual wheelchair for doing longer distances and those types of things. And finally got to the point where in 2010, my life changed yet again, in the winter of 2010. I describe it in the video you guys just saw, which is our trailer for an upcoming documentary that will be out in early 2016. It's called I'll Push You. I'll talk about that in a bit. But it's a point in my life where, you know, I was in a manual wheelchair. I could still do design work, and, you know, I was still trucking along, just doing what I do best. You know, I feel like I was born to be a designer. I just see life like that. I see life through the lens of design, typography and color and layout, and how it impacts the world around us and how you can solve problems for your clients. I truly, truly love that. But in the winter of 2010, I started noticing some weakness in my upper right shoulder, kind of late January of that year. By about a month later, early March, late February, early March, I had lost about 60 to 70% of my upper body. So, how do you go to the bathroom? How do you get your clothes on every day? How do you eat? How do you work? How do you hold your children or your wife's hand? Very dark place I was in. And I saw for the first time in my life this deep, dark hole, this blackness. And if any of you have ever been there, it's a horrible place to be. But I realized at that moment I could go down two roads. I could go down that deep, dark hole, or I could decide to do something with my life, knowing that my time being a designer is now coming to an end. And I didn't know what that looked like. I had no idea. So, skip forward, 2012. Nondescript Saturday, watching good old PBS and Rick Steves. Who knows who Rick Steves is? Woo! The geekiest travel guy in the world. But I love him. He's the best. And I was just flipping through the channels, not knowing that my life was going to change at that moment yet again. He started talking about Spain, Pamplona, the running of the bulls, all of that stuff. And the last 15 minutes of that episode was this little journey called the Camino de Santiago. Who's heard of that? Yeah. Who's been on it? Yes. 2, 3. Do your hands again. Hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Congratulations. 5. That, usually I don't meet very many people who have done it. But I learned about this pilgrimage across northern Spain, and I recorded this episode, and my best friend Patrick came down to visit me in San Diego. I was living in San Diego at the time, and I showed him the episode, and I said, "What do you think?" And his response was simple and direct. He said, "I'll push you." And I was like, okay. I think both of us going into it completely naive, right? So I learned about this journey, not knowing what it's going to be about. It's an ancient pilgrimage, for those who don't know. There are many routes you could take. It's been around since, like 9th century? 9th century. And it was used as a trade route. Then it was used as, Napoleon used it. And then there was, it was just, then became a Catholic pilgrimage. The goal is to end at the cathedral in a city called Santiago de Compostela. And it's in the very, very northwest corner of Spain. We took what's called the French route, and we started in France. Yes, in another country. If you see on the red line, it kind of divides on the right-hand side. On the very top, the kind of shorter start, that's where we started, just over the Pyrenees mountain range. We traversed over the Pyrenees mountain range. The Pyrenees mountain range spans France and Spain. We had to go over the Pyrenees mountain range, across the middle of Spain, across 2 more mountain ranges, and then finally end in Santiago. And so, as you can imagine, it was very challenging. And you're about to learn how challenging it was. So, moving on. Day 1, the Pyrenees. You have to go over a mountain range the first day in a wheelchair for the first time in history. From at least my knowledge, I'm the only one in its history to ever complete it in a wheelchair. Thank you. Day 1 by far was the hardest thing we had ever done in our entire lives. And I'll tell you what, this is way outside my wheelhouse. I'm a designer, used to sitting behind a computer, doing stuff, all day long, and all of a sudden I find myself at the base of a mountain. We start in a village called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. It's in Basque country, absolutely beautiful, and we start going up. As soon as you leave the village, it is straight up. Anybody who cycles or hikes in this room, raise your hand. On average, 20 to 25% grades, as steep as 30%, if not steeper. Yeah. So, day 1 was, there's Patrick and I. Out front is my buddy Ted, our buddy Ted. He's a firefighter, mountain rescue, and he said, "Hey, you guys need help?" And we're like, "Yeah, we need help getting over the Pyrenees. Would you be willing to help us?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm coming over." So the 3 of us start going up this hill. Move on. As soon as we start going up, it is straight uphill. There's my wheelchair, if you can see it. I didn't take this wheelchair. I took a specialized wheelchair. It took 5 months to make. It is, I describe it as an off-road baby jogger on steroids. basically. It's about $8,000 to make this chair. Luckily, I had a sponsor pay for it. There's Patrick about to throw up. We're about 3 miles in at this moment, by the way. So as we keep climbing, working our way up, we get about halfway up the mountain. The Pyrenees is about a 4,000-foot elevation gain, which isn't too terribly steep. I mean, it sounds crazy to say that. It's not like a 10,000-foot, peak or anything. 4,000 feet, but you start at almost sea level. So it's quite a trek up. So we get halfway up this hill. I look at this place called the Stone Cross. I see this stone cross. I don't know how old it is, but it's old. And I look ahead, and I'm like, no, that can't be the trail. And we look at it, and luckily, we put our heads together and figured out how to get this. So go ahead and play the clip. I literally had to be carried up this step. It was so steep over boulders that it took us an hour and a half. Took us an hour and a half to go about 150 yards. There we are way up in the mountains climbing. Pat and Ted would carry me, 15, 20 feet, then set me down. And they end up setting me down, and I'm resting in this area, just kind of taking in the moment, and it's absolutely quiet. I mean, it is just dead quiet. And you can hear bells off in the distance of the cows, and I'm just taking this moment to just take it in, just trudging up this hill. And I have my eyes closed, and I look up. Go to the next slide. There's a French Basque man straddling me, slapping me in the face. And I'm like, hey? And he said the most amazing thing to me. He was talking to me and doing my best to communicate. And after he slaps me in the face, he turns to walk away, and he says these 3 words. Well, 4 words. The impossible is possible. The impossible is possible. He had never seen in his entire life a guy in a wheelchair coming over the Pyrenees mountain range. And he was a local farmer fixing a pilgrim's hut way up in the mountains made of stone. And he just lived in the mountains and helped people with this little shelter. So if a pilgrim got caught in inclement weather, they'd have a place to go. And he was up there repairing it. And he saw me coming by and decided to slap me in the face. So we get back in my chair, come around the corner, and encounter this. 200 yards of 8 to 10 inches of mud. And there was no choice but to go through it. Sometimes the only way through something is through it. There was cliff on one side, mountain on the other. There was no choice. We come around the corner again, and there's other stretches of mud. All day we were fighting this. So as we kept climbing and climbing, we keep going along cliffside, absolutely beautiful green. And after about 10 and a half hours, we finally summit, now looking down into Spain, just across the French-Spanish border. It took us 13 and a half hours on day 1. And that was the beginning of our 35-day journey. Now, day 2. Before I get to day 2, I realized that you can do pretty much anything for a day. Day 2, Houston, we have a problem. Just woke up the next morning, just conquered the Pyrenees, beside ourselves that we made it. We're about 2 to 3 miles into our second day, and I'm not going to go through every day, by the way. I'm just going to highlight a couple days. But we're about in the middle of a forest, and Pat is up ahead scouting, and Ted's behind me pushing, and we're just cruising along, trucking along, right? Easy day. So I thought. In the middle of the forest, it's kind of raining, just kind of moving our way through it. And then all of a sudden, I go, straight forward. And this happened. Next slide. The front wheel of my 3-wheeled wheelchair broke off in the middle of a forest, not like 3 or 4 miles from the nearest town. What do you do with a broken wheelchair in the middle of the forest in a foreign country where you don't really speak the language? So through a series of events where we met some amazing people, they took us in, some strangers took us in. We ended up making our way to Pamplona, where the running of the bulls happens and all that type of stuff. We went to a bike shop because we're trying to figure out, okay, well, aluminum is a very, very temperamental metal. It takes a very specialized person to weld it. It's just not like any type of weld will make it happen. You have to take it to a special person. So we found, we're like, okay, well, who makes aluminum things? Well, a bike shop would do that, right? A mountain bike shop. So we went to the mountain bike shop. As soon as we go to the front door, they close for siesta. I'm like, which means 3 hours, 4. They may not even come back. You never know. So next door was a medical supply store. Go in. This guy was visiting his girlfriend who worked behind the counter at the medical supply store. Turns out he had an interest in welding. Called a buddy. He's like, I can't do this. He called a buddy. Buddy said, he'll come down, take a look at it. He came down. He's like, no, I can't help you. He called 2 or 3 more other friends. We had this we called the 7 degrees of finding an aluminum welder in Pamplona. We end up getting the chair dropped off, fixed. He's like, yep, come back tomorrow, see if it's fixed. We're like, okay. Come back the next day, completely fixed. We're on the road, less than 48 hours after the wheel broke. It's the power of this journey. People come alongside of you and help you when you need it. So off we were. I'm going to skip ahead to day 28. A bunch of new friends. A couple days prior, Patrick and I were in a cathedral in a city called Burgos. Beautiful cathedral. Just checking it all out, looking at all the art. And I hear this, hey, aren't you Justin Patrick? We're like, yeah. And we're like, hey, my name's Joe, and my name's Richard. And we're like, okay, cool. And they're like, we're from Boise, Idaho, which is our hometown, of all places. And they said, hey, would you guys need some help? We're like, yeah, we're thinking about coming up on our 3rd mountain pass called Osabrero, a very, very steep mountain pass. And yet again, we've had so many people tell us, don't do it, you can't make around it, or whatever. It's a really steep thing, you can't make it. And we're like, well, we went over the Pyrenees, and they're like, yeah, no, you didn't. We're like, yeah, we went over the Pyrenees. And they're like, okay, well, you're still not going to be able to make it. We're like, okay. So we're like, all right, well, skip ahead. We decided to meet. Joe, Richard, and Pat and I and our friend Michael and his son Matthew decided to, we all met at this cafe at the base of this mountain pass. And they said, okay, we'll meet you there, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, cool. We show up at this cafe, and we see him. We're like, hey, all right, let's go, And the entire cafe gets up. And I'm like, who are all these people? And there were 12 people or so, I think about an extra 9 or so, there 10 that added, that came alongside and saw Joe and Richard sitting there, and they said, what are you guys doing here? And they said, well, we're here to help Justin and Patrick get over Osabrero. And they said, all right, we'll stop and help. And I said, okay. So they all stopped. We show up at this cafe. Everyone gets up. We're like, all right, cool. This is so awesome. So I'm going to show you raw footage of our film from that day. Here we are at the base. We had just left the village, and we're working our way up towards the trailhead. Okay, we get to the trailhead. We can either take a road or the trail. Both very steep. And everyone kind of turns around and looks at me and says, hey, Justin, what do you want to do? And I said, well, life's never easy. Let's take the trail. So off we go, not knowing what was right around the corner. We come around the corner, and it is straight up a mountain. So steep that it took 6 people to carry me at any given time. People carried me up this mountain, literally. So as they were carrying me, other people would carry the people who were carrying me and their backpacks. So you got two people carrying two backpacks while they were carrying me, and then somebody would tap out and say, man, I can't do this anymore, I'll go back. Somebody would go scout out the trail, and I'm just like, we're working our way up this mountain. I'm being pushed, pulled, dragged, manhandled up this mountain, working our way up as best as we can, going through these little villages, and the whole village is out. And by the time we get towards the top, we're escorted by the police. And every time I would turn around, there'd be a new person behind me. 17 people in total helped me that day. Pretty amazing. You know, it's very humbling to be at the epicenter of all of that. And sometimes it's hard to have people help you. But sometimes being able, allowing yourself to be helped by either fellow designers or a community, it can take you places you never thought you would be able to go. And I learned this amazing quote that I'd like to share with you. And I don't know who said it, but I'll do my best to repeat it to you, okay? And I learned this lesson. When you deny someone the opportunity to help you, you deny them the joy in life. When you deny someone the opportunity to help you, you deny them the joy in life. Those people helping me get up that mountain, they didn't do it because of their own gain. They did it because they saw a need, they filled that need. But I can see from being on the receiving end of that, the happiness it brought for them. Pretty powerful. So 34 days later, we arrive in Santiago, one day ahead of schedule. Play the clip. Waiting in the square are Pat and myself, our wives are waiting for us. We had not seen them in almost 6 weeks. And when I describe it as dying and going to heaven, because all the people that were in the square were people that had helped us along our way. And some of them are caught in this film, but a lot of them were kind of in the background. And we're coming up towards the middle of the square in Santiago, and my wife Kirsten and Pat's wife Donna are waiting for us. And by far, probably one of the most amazing experiences that I had ever been a part of. Because I accomplished this because I had an audacious dream. But I also made it happen because my best friend who loved me said yes. And our wives said yes. And our children said yes. And our community said yes. And I don't know who that lady is. Those guys are hitchhikers from Florence. So there's Joe and Richard. And you've heard me kind of yap on for the last few minutes on my best friend. And I want you guys to meet my best friend, Patrick Gray. Patrick, please come on up. Yeah.
How you guys doing?
Thank you. I love you.
Love you too, buddy. I'd have to do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta say I'm so proud of you, first thing, seriously. I mean, what's not to be proud of? But I want to add just one thing. As I was sitting here listening to the talk, and I'm not a designer, I'm not a creative individual in the traditional form that you guys here are, but having the opportunity to just live life with an individual who has this creative mind and just sees things differently, I developed an appreciation for things like typeface, and kerning. I loved the opportunity that he would give me to try and guess what typeface it is on a sign. Like, I have no idea, you know? But it's a different perspective on certain things that just gives me this joy that I didn't have just because he's a designer and he sees things differently. Color, white space, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh man, I didn't see things that way before because my mind doesn't work that way. Now you take that same philosophy and translate it to how he lives life now. And I'm getting emotional, sorry. The perspective that you all possess is so unique. You're a very unique breed. And if you just design as opposed to live life from a creative standpoint, you're selling yourself short, and you're selling everybody that's a part of your life short. Please do not underestimate the power that your creativity has to influence others. Don't take that for granted, okay?
So we have a little lesson from Dr. Seuss. Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places, you're off and away. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the guy who will decide where to go. Oh, the places you'll go. You'll be on your way up, you'll be seeing great sights, you'll join high flyers who soar to high heights. Except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. I'm sorry to say so, but sadly, it's true. And hang-ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch, and your gang will fly on, you'll be left in a lurch. You'll come down from the lurch with an unpleasant bump, and chances are then you'll be in a slump. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done. You'll come to a place where the streets are not marked, some windows are lighted, but mostly they're darked. A place you can sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? You can get so confused that you'll start in to race down long, wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, to the most useless place, the waiting place. Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for the wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or pot to boil, or better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig of curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. Somehow you'll escape all that waiting and staying. You'll find the bright places where boom bands are playing. With banner flip-flapping, once more you'll ride high, ready for anything under the sky, because you're that kind of guy. But I'm afraid that sometimes, too, you'll play lonely games, too. Games you can't win because you'll play against you. And when you're alone, there's a very good chance you'll meet things that scare you right out of your pants. There are some down the road between hither and yon that can scare you so much that you won't want to go on. But on you will go, though the weather be foul. On you will go, though your enemies prowl. On you will go, though the hackencracks howl. Onward up many a frightening creek, though your arms may get sore and your sneakers may leak. And on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far, to face up to your problems, whatever they are. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So to be sure, when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll climb mountains. So, be your name, be Buxom or Bixby or Bray or Mordecai, Alley, Van Allen, O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So get on your way. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.